Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Whole Wellness Mama Summit, where we are unlocking the healthiest, less stressed mom in you using strategies from various wellness experts. I'm your host, Amy Nesbitt, and I am super excited to sit down and talk about how to stop yelling at our kids with Hunter Clarke-Fields. She is an MSAE RYT and a mindful mama mentor. She is the creator of the Mindful Parenting course, host of the Mindful Mama podcast, and widely followed author of Raising Good Humans, a mindful guide to breaking the cycle of reactive parenting and raising kind, confident kids. She helps parents bring more calm and peace in their daily lives. And I'm just going to add hashtag mom goals. This truly resonated with me because before motherhood, I thought, oh, I'm not going to be a yeller, but find myself talking to my fellow mamas more often than I'd like about how I yelled at my kids, then felt bad and apologized to my kids about how I reacted. And so hopefully and thankfully, I think it has been less and less, but I'm excited to add more strategies to my tool belt and that we can all use. So welcome, Hunter.
Thank you, Amy. So glad to be here.
I know you
I
share
can
a bit.
relate
Yeah, I know
completely
you
to
share
your
a bit.
story.
Yeah. I was just going to start. I'm going to say, I know you share a bit in your book, but I'd love if you could share your quick story of how you came to where you are now.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I can relate completely to your story because I, did the work in creating the mindful parenting course and raising good humans and raising good humans every day because I was a yeller and my temper really came out when my daughter was like 1.5, 2 years old. And I, like, before I became a mom, it's like, I'm going to be so calm. We're going to be close and connected and all of those things. And then I found myself yelling at her and scaring her. And I could see I like made her cry and I could see this disconnection happening and just feeling so terrible about it and realizing like, and it really was this that drove me into do the work that I was doing because I was learning from from parenting coaches and do great things, and even I got myself certified in parent effectiveness training, and I learned these great things, but the thing was that you couldn't they would tell me like great ways to respond and I couldn't remember any of them when I was triggered in my stress response. And now, I know, of course, why, because of our brains, our whole brain isn't on board there. But I could really see that I had been reading about and studying mindfulness since I was a teenager. And I had just started a meditation practice before my daughter was born. And then I could really see that I had to go back to that. And I could really see that all of these things that were being talked about in the mindfulness world really had to come into communication with what was being talked about in the parenting world, because, it was useless for me to learn the great things to say because I couldn't remember them and I couldn't access my whole brain. And so I could see that lowering my reactivity really had to be the foundation. It had to be the foundation for everything so that I could, and also understanding that, modeling is so much more important. And that the idea that even if if you're super reactive, but you can grit it and then try to like say, you must be feeling very upset. Like
It still
try to
shows.
like say like an empathetic response. Your kid's like, what's going on? Because they know when you're trying to fake it. Anyway, so like faking it doesn't work. Anyway, so the idea is I teach the skills that I desperately, desperately needed. And that's why I do the work that I do.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. It's you're trying, you know what you're supposed to do, but you just can't. I'd love to start with a baseline definition of mindfulness, since some may just think, oh, meditation or yoga or sitting in silence, which can be really, really hard. So, can you share what you mean by mindfulness?
Sure. I mean, mindfulness, there's a bunch of different ways to practice mindfulness, and mindfulness is basically a state that we're kind of practicing. And so the mindfulness is a practice of putting your attention in the present moment. And that could be on anything in the present moment. It could be like silently with your breath, or it could be with your child or your footsteps. So putting your attention into the present moment with, and this is very important, with an attitude of kindness and curiosity. if you put your attention in the present moment and then you judge yourself super harshly, that's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is with an attitude of kindness and curiosity, which is the opposite of judgment, non-judgment. So we're practicing this because this is not the way our brains function normally. Our brains are normally often not in the present moment, or we are in the future, we're planning ahead, we're deciding what we're going to wear to the pool later. We're thinking about dinner, we've got tomorrow's agenda on the brain, we're thinking about the past and how I could have responded to my kid when he tried to smack his little brother, right? Like
Yeah.
we're like in anywhere but the present moment. We're kind of on autopilot in our responses. We're not. And so the idea is, like, when we can practice mindfulness, it's bringing mind and body together, bringing actually, there's the Chinese ideogram for mindfulness. The word has been translated into mindfulness, but mind and heart can mean the same thing in that ideogram, from what I understand. I'm not an expert on this, and so it can almost be seen as like heartfulness, and the idea of it's really about like being in our senses, being in our heart, being in our sense of touch, what we see, what we hear, not being lost in our judgments and our assumptions and our thoughts, but actually being here with what is real. And it's a practice, and we're not going to be mindful all the time. It's something we practice so that we can get there when we want to get there and when we need to get there.
That's so important, especially it's so countercultural, right? Because there's so much multitasking, especially as moms and women. It's just become this thing of multitasking everything. So I love this idea of focusing, and I do special time with my kids, which is a very focused time with them, especially as a working mom. It's a very valuable time for me.
And I love that you mentioned that, because that is mindfulness of your children. So like when you're practicing mindfulness, you have an anchor, right? Something that's going to pull you back to the present moment. So you keep our brains are, they call monkey mind, right? Like our brains are thinking factories, and that's normal. That's like, we're not trying to stop our thinking. Just as the eyes see and the ears hear, the mind thinks. That's like what it does. So that's okay. That's totally normal. But we don't necessarily want to be thinking about tomorrow's plans while we're with our kids, right? Like, and you're trying to do my special time. So the practice of like a mindful special time is then using your child as the object of mindfulness, like an object of putting your attention upon them with kindness and curiosity. So you're open to who are they today? You might be distracted, and then you say, oh, I'm thinking about tomorrow. Here, I'll kindly bring my attention back to the present moment without being harsh on myself, because Hunter said, minds think just as ears hear, right? And that's normal. And I'll just keep coming back and practicing. And it's really like about this idea of getting up and beginning anew and practicing it again and again and again.
For moms that don't know where to start, where they're going, yes, I want to stop yelling, but I don't know where to start, what would you say to them first?
That's a good question. I mean, the thing about yelling is that there's a lot of factors that play into it, and it's not any one thing, right? So one of the biggest factors in reducing our yelling, because it's okay for,
We're not perfect.
Perfect is not an option. We're not gonna like never yell again. Like, you're not gonna turn into a robot. You don't want to go for that anyway. So, but to reduce your yelling, one of the biggest factors is actually to reduce your overall stress in your life. And so that means like things like getting enough sleep, getting regular exercise, getting time with supportive family and friends. And that may be like, are you freaking kidding me, Hunter? Like, that's not going to happen. But hopefully, the thing is that, moms particularly tend to, put time for ourselves as this like last priority, but actually it is like a foundation for us to be less reactive, because the more stress we have, that we're kind of low level chronic stress that we're living with, the easier it is to just then flip us into reactive yelling. It just becomes that much easier, like when you're hangry, right? Like that's that. So like taking care of our needs and lowering our overall stress is like one of the biggest factors. And then a mindfulness practice really, really helps with that enormously, because it's like practicing not reacting. Like I do a sitting meditation in the morning, and when I sit there, stuff happens like in my brain, like all kinds of thoughts arise, and I practice not reacting to them, right? And so that helps me build that non-reactivity muscle. It's like there's a wonderful famous quote by the Holocaust survivor and the psychologist Viktor Frankl, and he says that this in between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our ability to choose our response, and in choosing our response lies our growth and our freedom. And that's really like kind of what we're aiming for, right? Like we want that space. So you got to take care of yourself. And then maybe you got to practice like being non-reactive, you know what I mean? And then sometimes like with, yelling particular, I also say it's a great idea to have like a little menu, a little like a emergency triage post-it notes. I invite people to do around the house, where they have some mind body tools written down to practice bringing their nervous system down and reminding their nervous system that it's not an emergency, and to really use those tools to calm down. So, and I'm happy to share some of those if you want.
I want to talk about breathing in a second, but since you brought this up, I noticed that I have trigger items, right? So I've noticed these things over the course of the last few years, especially in the pandemic, and knowing those is super useful going into various situations, and also when it's like the end of a workday, or been stressed with other things, or I just haven't been able to fill my own cup with whatever that may be for me. I often react very poorly to things, and it's funny that we notice that in our kids, right? You said hangry. We notice that in our kids. We notice that there are things that we need to do to not have them react poorly, but we forget that for ourselves. Right?
So true.
Yeah. Can you share some tips about? Oh, go ahead.
No, I think you were. Yeah, go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, I was just going to ask, can you share some tips about identifying our own triggers to prevent blowups? Because I feel like that is a huge thing of knowing what those things might be.
It is huge. It's enormously helpful. Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, there are triggers and there are stressors, right? So the way I look at triggers might be things that it's kind of like your baggage that you're bringing with you from your childhood and your upbringing and your culture and things like that. So in mindful parenting, like we have this module where we try to help people identify what their triggers are. And this one woman, she said like, okay, I've discovered that when my 2-year-old spills juice, my outsized reaction has nothing to do with him spilling juice. It is about in my childhood, like there's this emphasis on perfectionism, and my household being like looking a certain way triggers this thing in me where I feel less than, right? And so she had to like make this thing that was unconscious, that was driving her to yell at her kid, conscious, to be able to deal with it, right? To be able to say, oh, okay. Oh, there's the juice. Oh, I feel like I'm crazy right now because of old childhood stuff. Okay, that's me. And just being able to like identify that goes a real long way to kind of really lowering the temperature. It really helps a lot. Just it like interrupts the pattern, which is cool. So it's really helpful to identify our triggers, and look at our childhood and kind of understand it. And there's, in Raising Good Humans, there's questions and stuff that I share with people. But then there's stressors being like, I have to be somewhere on time. Isn't that like the number one thing? Like, oh my God, I feel like our ancient ancestors never had to deal with this. They were like, when the sun rises, we will go to this place, and like when we're ready. Like now we're like at 5:02, I have to leave the house.
Yeah. And the kids don't have their shoes on, or whatever.
I know. Yeah. Time. It drives me bananas. But anyway, so triggers are like time. I haven't eaten. The house is a mess. There's too much on our schedule right now. Those kind of things are stressors. So we want to try to do our best to mitigate the stressors in our life and like get help with all the different things that are stressful, maybe simplify our schedules and, declutter the toys or declutter our houses or whatever. And then, and sometimes it helps to just look back, look to take a week and let yourself be normal and then just like write down in a journal, like, oh, this is why I freaked out at my kids today. Like, and just jot it down, like, take a log of when you're getting frustrated and upset and say, oh, okay, I'm getting frustrated every single day at bedtime.
Mhm.
Okay, what can I do to mitigate this? So, just all of that self-awareness, self-understanding goes a long way to helping us deal with the things are our stuff to deal with and not our kids' fault.
I think I've had to definitely let go the timing, how things or timing of when things get done and how things get done, because
Oh my
everybody has a
God,
very
yes.
different way of doing things. But I'm letting that go slowly. I want to come back to uh, breathing because just to share a quick story, I think in the pandemic, it was so helpful when we were working from home and trying to do virtual school and my kid could no longer go to preschool and all the things. Um, Sometimes I just had to lay down when I felt like I was going to explode and say, Mama needs a minute, just, I don't want to say anything I regret. And I laid down, just took some deep breaths, and I think it's really helpful for them to see that I was processing big
Love
feelings
that.
also. And it just made me feel so much better, right? And then I could sit up and say, okay, I'm ready to have this conversation. Um, and we can talk about that for kids as well, because I think breathing, helping them understand those tools is so important. But can you talk about the role of breathing and how it can calm ourselves down?
Oh, but that's so brilliant because it's so much better than even talking to your kids about it, is just you doing it. Because you're going to see them do it. They're going
Yeah.
to just do it just because you do it. Like it's not like something you need to teach them necessarily even. I mean, maybe you can, but yeah. So what I'm hearing from you, Amy, is that what you're saying is like you grounded yourself literally. You were like, I will have the solidity of the ground beneath me. I'm lying down. That's great. Like, because sometimes I recommend to people you sit and imagine you're kind of like solid like a mountain, but you're lying down. That's great. You're even like, you're super not threatening to your kids. So you're not triggering their fight, flight, or freeze response. There's all kinds of good things happening there. You're saying out loud what you're feeling, which is name it to tame it, which really lowers the temperature. There's all those things. So breathing was part of that, but like there were a lot of things that were going on
Yay.
besides breathing, which is cool. Um, yeah, breathing can do a lot. So basically, like when we're about to like lose it with our kids and we're super frustrated, our stress response is activated. Our body is, our brain is scanning the environment for threats. Our blood pressure has risen, our heart rate has risen, our breathing is shorter and faster so that we can fight off this threat. And if that doesn't work, then flee to safety. So we need to then let our systems know that there's not a threat so that we can access our whole brain. Because one of the other things it does is that it cuts off access to the slower parts of the brain, because you don't want to be like making a big long decision about how to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. You just want to run, right? So but we want our prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of verbal ability, problem solving, creativity, impulse control. We want all of that on board, right? Like, though it's super, super important. So, as we start to get into that place, rather than saying, oh, I want to be calm, and Hunter and Amy say it's good to be calm, so I'm going to be calm. Calm. I'm calm. I'm calm. And then I'm freaking losing it because I can't be calm anymore, right? Like we don't want to do that. That's fake calm. It does not work. Okay, it does not help you. Instead, first, just acknowledge what's going on. Like I'm starting to get frustrated, guys. I'm feeling my chest get tight. I'm starting to get frustrated. My shoulders feel tight. I need a minute, right? And so when we can even verbalize kind of partway out the path, like when we're just annoyed rather than enraged, or frustrated rather than biting their heads off, that's great, because that's like ding 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 ding, oh, you need to do something about this, right? It's a bell of mindfulness, a bell of awareness. And then we can use the tools to, then we know we want to be able to use our whole brain. So we have to calm that stress response, right? We have to, and we can just, the breath is great because it's like a biohack. Because the thing about the breath that's so cool is that each inhale is a mini fight, flight, or freeze stress response. Each exhale is a mini rest and relax response in your body, right? So there's a couple things that are happening. So when you when you breathe just slower and deeper, you're telling your body that there's not a a man-eating carnivore in front of you and that you can breathe deeply and there's no threat, right? But also, like, so when you can exhale longer than you inhale, because each exhale is a mini rest and relax response, you're forcing the body into that rest and relax response out of fight, flight, or freeze. Okay. So super simple way to do that is to just like breathe in for 4, breathe out for 6. Let's do it one more time for good measure. Inhale 4, out for 6. You might be able to feel the difference already. I know I can, right?
Yeah.
So the breath is like great for that. So you can use your body to kind of biohack your way back into whole brain thinking. You can also use something like what Amy did. You could lie on the ground, completely ground yourself. I love that. Or you could just sit cross-legged if you feel more comfortable. You don't want to lie on the ground. You can you can do the 4-6 breathing. You might put a hand to your heart and say, this is not an emergency. It's not an emergency. Right? And if you tell your kids what you're doing, great. They're just going to learn it from you. You're going to model healthy emotional regulation, right? And so those are like my favorite tools to share because it's simple and it takes a little practice. That's all. Sometimes you need to practice it in a calm moment so that you have access to it in the tough moments.
So great. So great. And if we can help our kids learn that too, it's fantastic. So I know they go, but, you're like, breathe, breathe. I try to do like the candle thing, but I just breathe out.
But don't do it. But listen, don't do it to your kids when they're in an upset moment.
Yeah.
So just so I said, like for you, dear parent, like you want to, like I said, practice it in a calm moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same for your kid because your kid, chances are likely that the same thing that happened to my children will happen to your children where they will not like it because you're trying to control them out of their upset feelings. You're only doing it in the difficult times, right? Which is what I did. Don't make my mistake, right? Do it instead. Do it at bedtime. Do it whenever, like do it, when you, after you get out of school or just some calm time where it feels good to calm down. You're going to say, we're going to try this nice breath. We're going to, you can do it with your hand. You can say, we're going to inhale for 4, exhale for 6. And then you do it 5 times as you go up and down your fingers. And then you're feeling your fingers too, which is like a sensory mindfulness of touch, right? So don't just teach it to your kid in the tough time because then they're going to associate it with that give them the tool before they need it.
Fantastic point. I love the bedtime idea. I'm gonna go try that. And then can we talk quickly about how to communicate with our kids, because I feel like this is such an important part of course we're trying to model it, but sometimes we try to speak and how we speak is so much more important because including perhaps especially for apologizing, because we tend to react and we're saying things. They may not disagree with some of those things fundamentally, but the way that we are saying it or it just might not sit well. And so then we get into this headbutting, right? Is there any tips, I guess, on how we can speak with our children instead of making commands, requests? It's like we would never talk to other adults or friends a lot of the ways that we talk to our kids. Are there any tips on how to talk to our kids well?
I know this is so hard because we live in a culture that is very kind of rude and disrespectful to kids, and we just absorb that. We just absorb that. Um, in mindful parenting, I teach these communication barriers, and people are like, "Oh my God, I'm doing all of those," I'm like, "I'm sorry, I know." But yeah, the thing about communicating with our kids is that we want to give what we want to receive back, right? So we don't want our kids ordering us. We don't want them yelling at us. So we have to practice to to speak in the way we want to be spoken to. So sometimes it can sometimes I think like a little quick hack that can help is like, how would I say this to my friend's child? How would I say this to my friend's child? Like, whatever we have to leave, right? Like, how would I say this to my friend's child? Sometimes that can be very helpful to doing it. And then sometimes I think like we can sometimes I think we talk too much, right? Like we also like talk a lot to kids. Like the 30,000 words thing like got in our heads and now we're just like blathering on like crazy. And like, it's one of the things that's the most crucial communication skills is just to listen, is to really practice to listen to them. Like, I really wanted to be aware of this, as I started learning and putting together these tools. And I remember when my daughter, who's now 16, was 4, she would tell me about My Little Pony. She would tell me all about like what Twilight Sparkle was doing and blah, 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 blah. And I'd be like, okay. And, I would bring my attention back. Okay. I'm practicing to listen. And I would put my phone down. I'd close my laptop lid. And what's cool about that is that now she talks to me. She's 16 and she comes to me and she tells me things because she knows that I'll listen to her. And that's kind of what we want to think about is like, what's the long game here? Like, do we want, can we be a real, authentic person with this little person? And that's really what's kind of most important, right? Like, we don't want to be role to role with our kids, right? Like, mommy to child, like forever, right? Like we want to be soul to soul rather than role to role, rather than being this version of you that is the perfect role of mother. Be you, be the be the silly you, be the whatever you, and just be yourself. Don't like say mommy will be coming, I will be coming, right? Like it's okay for kids to know that you have feelings, and it's okay for you to be a whole and complete human being with your kids. And I think that we respect our kids when we listen to them, when we can speak to them as we want to be spoken to ultimately, and when we can be real with them. I mean, I'm not saying like your child is your best friend that you're going to share all your secrets with. No, but like be authentic with your kids.
I love that when you said soul to soul, not role to role. I love that. I hadn't heard that ever before, so I appreciate that. And perhaps this is why you wrote your new book. I know it's coming out soon, but those tips and tricks, kind of more of the daily applications. Is that what we can expect?
Yeah. Raising good humans every day is like, here it is. It's a little, it's this like little book, which I like, and it's 50 short chapters. So yeah, it's like this way of, it's this way of like expanding into all these kind of different areas of life, like including our home and our household and the ways we communicate and our mindset and all these different things. But the idea is that like each chapter is like three or 4 pages long. It's really short. So you can dive into it at any point. And I want to take, I'm not a neuroscientist and I'm not a psychologist, but I'm someone I can take this information that is so, so crucial and share it in a way that that distills it down to what's important and really simple. And I think that these tiny little lessons can really shape us in enormous ways.
And I think that's what we need, right? Just effective, practical tools that we can access quickly. And do you have, I know you shared a few already. Do you have some specific favorites you'd like to leave with us before? Or maybe that could be part of our quick action or challenge, since I do like to
Oh,
end
no,
with a quick action or challenge for people as well.
sure. I have one.
Okay.
Um, so this is from chapter 21, How to Pause. And the idea about pausing, like I used to drive me crazy. Like people would say, like, step one, pause. And I'd be like, yeah, well, how do you do that? Thanks a lot, right? Like, so um
I wish I
so
could. Yeah.
I know, right? I wish I could. Anyway, we can practice this, right? Like we can practice this in non-problem moments. So we just stop moving. We like ground your feet on the ground, or you just sit down, right? Place a hand to your heart, and it might even be like you just take a deep breath, you take a few deep breaths, maybe you sit or kneel by your child and you just be still, be present. And you can, like, say your child comes to you and asks a question that's like, there's no problem, there's nothing bad happening, but they ask you a question. You can just maybe hold their hand or put a hand on your heart and just breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in and out a couple of times. Practice pausing before you respond in a no problem zone. And then you can do it, right? Because you practiced it. What you practice grows stronger.
So should that be our challenge for the day for our mamas? Because we like to
That
leave them
is
with
your
a quick
challenge. Challenge
action.
it
Perfect.
for the next like 3 or 4 days. Just practice putting in a pause in a couple times in your day.
Yeah. So
And
mamas,
then in a no problem zone.
yeah. So mamas, go try that out and come back. Let us know if you have questions or if how it went. I would love to hear how that went. So Hunter, I know you have a fabulous free gift for everyone. Can you share what that is and how people can connect with you further?
Sure. I have a quick video, which is my top 2 favorite tools to stop yelling, and the 6-step mindful parenting roadmap. Super simple, super easy, and I think you'll like it.
Perfect. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Well, you can find Raising Good Humans every day anywhere books are sold. And you can find me at mindfulmamamentor.com. Everything's there. And you can find the Mindful Mama podcast, the Mindful Parenting course. And let me know what you think of all this if you want to tag me at Mindful Mama Mentor on Instagram.
Perfect. Anything else you would like to leave our mamas with before we wrap up?
Sure. I guess I just want to reiterate that, like, it's okay that you're not going to do this perfectly. It's okay that you make mistakes. I want you to give yourself permission to be human, because you're going to mess up, and it's okay. You're not going to break your kid. They need to have ups and downs and and different things in life for them to become a whole and well-rounded human being. It would be bad for them if you were perfect all the time, because they would be mistake-making human beings, and then they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. So give yourself permission to be human. And as we let ourselves relax a little and give ourselves permission to not strive so much, then we actually become better parents, right? So it's paradoxically like, give yourself permission to be human. It's very helpful.
I love that you said that, because then our kids don't think they need to be perfect and live up to that new expectation too. Yeah. Thank you so much, Hunter, for sharing such valuable, powerful information with us on our forever journey to become better, more calm, less stressed parents. Everyone, go check out her books. They're amazing, especially the new one coming out. Go pre-order and be sure to come back for more amazing summit speakers.